Okay. All right. I believe we are on live. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us. It's a beautiful Sunday up here in Humboldt County. I hope the weather is sending you some love as well, wherever you are. This world could use every little piece of love that we can muster, and truth and clarity and honesty. And today we get to sit down with someone that has been a ring of truth in my ear over the past few years through legalization, as well as a great support base for me. She really helped me come back into believing in the sisterhood around the plant. And today we get to sit down with Felicia. Good morning, Felicia. How are you?
I'm great. Happy Pride, happy Black Liberation, happy joy, joy, joy.
It is. There's a lot. It's a big day for you normally. Thank you for taking time of a really big celebration for you to sit down and talk here and share your heart with me and the rest of us.
Absolutely. There's actually no other place right now. People in the LGBTQ community are marching in solidarity with Black Lives Matters, kind of. I don't know. There's too much drama and controversy, and I'm also I'm just not into any of that, and I'm more trying to feel like, how do we tackle some of the systemic issues that we have in the LGBTQ community. So I'm gratefully sitting out and reminding everybody who's out there today in the city of Los Angeles in particular that, hey guys, there's a lot of work to do. It's not just today showing up in solidarity with the LGBTQ community and Black Lives Matters, or the All Lives Matter, All Black Lives Matter, or whatever it's being called right now, that there's going to be so much work tomorrow and the next day and the next day. So there's no other place I want to be, because I know that you're doing the work. And I know we didn't talk, we've had this going for like a month. I think you reached out to me, or like COVID times, and things have changed, but I'm grateful to be here. I'm grateful to talk to the folks here in particular about some of our collective responsibility.
Right on. Yeah, I'm really excited too, because we haven't really spoken since all of this, everything has kind of erupted, or maybe veils are being lifted finally, is a better way to talk about it with you. And I know that I became an activist not that long ago. I was born into activism, but I also rebelled against it. And you've spent a lot of your life fighting for the rights of people. And we're going to get into that a little more, but I would like to start with, because we are speaking to a cannabis audience, and I'd like to speak to, let's start with, somewhere where we all do come to the same table on, and let's talk about how you actually came to this plant, which is how you and I connected.
So she came to me. I feel like a lot of us who are children who experienced our parents consuming cannabis, or parents, for me, it was watching my dad and being very cognizant of the smells and just being different and not seeing anything wrong with it. And then fast forward to 1995, I'm a young queer kid living in the Bay Area going to school. Um, and I have sick friends, and somebody asks me if I could, they throw a big sack on my kitchen table in Berkeley and ask if I could take it um, to San Francisco, or can you take it to the city? And for me, it was a no-brainer, of course. Like, what? And you just let me know my friend was sick? I had no idea. I hang out with this person all the time. Like, they hadn't even been out with me about their status. And I think for me, that was a very fulfilling, defining moment, because when I was asked to do that, I was also made very aware, or re-aware, of my privilege. Like, come on, Felicia, you look white enough. It's not an issue. And I mean, I got to get really close to the plant for a number of years with that in mind in particular. So she came to me and
Oh no. Did I just lose you?
then pivoted back with, I'm still here. You're
Okay,
frozen.
good.
Are you? I was like, I was still here. You were just frozen. Um, and then when I pivoted back, it was in 2010, 2011, after we had lost Prop 19, and I had been working with the Courage campaign, or I think it's, I don't know what it's called now. It has the new name. They just announced it. But I was working with them, and we had done this event called Coming Out of the Green Closet, Medical Marijuana in the LGBTQ community. And I felt purpose again, not even about the LGBTQ community, but what I stepped in with, having the privilege of working with Dr. Alan Frankel, and then getting just really immersed into the healing properties of the plant, not just the stigma and perception that I had experienced as a person, but really just to get that at the center. And it brought me right back to like having a better understanding of why in 1995 my queer friends needed cannabis, because it wasn't for me during that time. So she's always just been around. I would imagine, I've been told that my grandmother, who I never met, she died in 1957, but that she grew this plant. So I'm hoping that that just means that in my ancestral lineage, that this plant is just a part of who I am. So
I feel that way. I think it is for a lot of us. I mean, it's just a part of humanity, isn't it? And so where has she taken you now? I mean, you've been with legalization. How has that impacted your journey in activism around the plant? Because it started as medicine, and how is that transitioned? How has legalization shifted that for you or changed your role?
wouldn't necessarily say it's shifted much. I mean, I've always been a community organizer. So before, stepping back in 2011, it was just, I was already organizing communities around intersectional ideas and thought. What legalization has, it's tried my patience, to be honest, like as an organizer and an activist on a lot of levels. So the first one would probably be the commercialization of cannabis. So how we've turned that into a marketplace and her into specifically a commodity. So because people in the industry aren't, in my humble opinion, spending enough money to accurately market her past just trying to sell a commodity, and not being cognizant that like, hey guys, this isn't like trying to sell some coconut water. Like there's been so many years and years, like 100 years worth of prohibition. So are you setting aside that same amount to market and expect those of us who are the activists to do the work now is offensive. So for me, it's been trying of my patience as an organizer in the community, because first and foremost, I'm not so much a member of the industry, although I do support businesses and help them develop corporate social responsibility models and be better. I'm a member of this community. Like this plant is my medicine. So like for me, like first and foremost, it's like, okay, how are we going to do better? So with legalization, I haven't seen us living up to our potential. I've seen a lot of this with not checks being written. I haven't seen a lot of real action. And then what I have seen are some duplicitous activities. And when I say duplicitous activities, I mean more like, hey guys, you can't throw some change into the jar for conversations like social equity and uplifting Black communities and brown communities while still spending more money on lobbying for enforcement. without actually thinking and creating better pathways. So for me, like, legalization has just challenged me as a leader to it's challenged me as a leader. Sometimes I feel like a whipping board. Sometimes I feel like people think that I owe them this work, which I don't owe anybody shit. And the reality is, like, we all have to make a conscious effort, all of us, every single day, to not be racist, every single day to be cognizant of our privilege, especially, you know, knowing just the history, not just of prohibition. But I think we like to stop at the history of prohibition and not roll it all the way back to like where the origins of this plan exists. So I don't know, legalization has taught me to be a better leader, to speak my truth at every single step and not care if I hurt your feelings, because we can hug it out in the corner, we can hug it out in front of everybody else, but we're going to have those conversations that are hard. And it's also just made me tired. I mean, look at my gray. Look at my
It's
gray. I mean, most people would
beautiful.
remember me with just a hat. Oh no, my gray is growing in beautifully. But I mean, I feel like the last 4 years I've gone to the mountaintop. I've
Yeah.
seen, and I've been diligently doing the work with seeing how legalization is actually impeding on some of the progress that we need to make to keep moving forward.
Yeah. So from that mountaintop view, you know, I always like to find the core of the problem and try to impact it there. In your opinion, if there was one shift that we could make, and let's focus on the California market because policy is crazy everywhere. But if there was one shift that we could make in California to help us, I know some might say roll back, or build forward in a more equitable way, what do you see that we could do as a community to help move us into that direction?
I don't know if there's just one thing. There's like a series of things. So
Okay.
last year we put out a report with UFCW 770. I have the link. Anybody can reach out to me. I'm pretty sure it's on my website too. Of the report that we wrote last year about corporate social responsibility and social equity via a broader lens. So I think, like, one of the big things we're finding now is that we're going to have to all collectively demand that in the state of California, more is done in regards to community reinvestment. Like, there's no way that the police getting 20%, 25%, with the police getting blanketed checks in our cities, because that's kind of what's happening. Like, we're not addressing any of those things with no real return. Like, I remember last year in the city of Los Angeles in particular, sitting with the former city council president's, one of his staffers, showing me, and if I tell you, I'm laughing because he showed me this little pretty package they made about what they did for social justice and social equity. And I was like, my gosh, this is shit you should be doing on the natch. Like, adding that it cost X amount of dollars to pave roads. And then it also made me simultaneously check my privilege, because I live somewhere where they pave my road twice a year, and people are fighting to just get this. And so I mean, there's a lot to be worked out, but I would imagine the first is we really need to readdress what that corporate social responsibility, as well as that government responsibility, because right now the government is making us all fight amongst each other over ultimately them being complicit. Like, they've been the biggest abusers of free labor, of stacking people with fines and fees, taking away people's freedoms. And we're not talking about that the way that we should. We're just talking about my business isn't surviving and all of these other things. But that, to me, the uniter is like, dude, our government is really fucking up and they're fucking us over. And we have to start doing something about it.
Yeah, it's time to revamp the system. It's time to
I wouldn't even say we got revolution. We need to have an overhaul, like to reimagine it, to dream it. I mean, I feel like those of us who have a higher calling are feeling that energy. We see those lights, we know that they're there. So it's going to be our responsibility to step up and even be bolder than we thought we were. Because the spiritual forces that exist, the simplicity of good versus evil is really going to require a lot of us who believe we're good to show the world that we are in fact good.
Yeah. I feel like the plant is because it is so economically strong and recognized for that and for its functions now more than it ever has been, that it really has a potential to unify
Oh,
around a
definitely. I
lot.
mean, education, once we start educating communities, I mean, I've been having these conversations with people in the industry who are just like, Felicia, I feel, I know we need to defund the police, but at the same time, I need to protect my own interest. And like, kind of having those conversations about like, well, what is our role? What can we do? What does that transformation look like on our parts in particular? And it all stems back to education, like to explain to people like, hey, those marketing ducats that you're throwing into the bucket to just pass out your product to people who are already coming to church, like that's asinine to me. Like, you guys are not good drug dealers. Like, I'm going to give you lesson 101. Like, that is not how you bring people to the party. Like, I mean, no offense to anybody who is doing any of those things, but I think that right now, to be able to actually educate and empower, especially Black and Indigenous people of color communities, means a bunch of things. It means getting those natural allies to this progressive conversation to feel like we actually are investing in them. Because see, in that liberation, with giving them the education that they need, giving them the resources that they need, and explaining to us. I mean, I'm part of that community too. I always have to tell my friends who are participating in the traditional marketplace still, who are doing it because of economic reasons, why most people do, right? Because it's cheaper. Like, but we don't know what's in it. And see, that comes with education, that comes with awareness, and that's actually our responsibility. I know that people in the industry think that that's the government's industry or responsibility. It's like, dude, why? It's not the government's job to try to sell your weed for you. It's your job to sell your weed for yourself. Your cannabis, your whatever you want to call her, it's your job to do that. And she accepts all names. We know that. She's okay with everything. Like, she's survived millennia. She's going to outlive all of us, this entire civilization. We can all go away. And guess what? She's still going to find a way to grow. And I think that that just is also reflective of the communities where she's indigenous to. So like for a lot of us, I know that like we're going to have to start thinking about all of those things. Like the power of this plant, where she comes from, where her origins are, and what our responsibility looks like as people who truly love her, to make sure to respect everything. I don't know, education.
So this is women empowered in cannabis, and we have a lot of new women who are coming to the plant who engage. And are building a new business. We have a lot of entrepreneurs. So what are some of those things that you would like to have new folks coming into our industry consider as they're building that business that could help these issues?
So I think to the new entrepreneur, like my message is super simple, and I think it's kind of profound that it's during this time. Especially as we get closer to Juneteenth in particular. It's like our job is to celebrate, right? Our job is to educate, and then our job is to agitate. So as women in particular, we have been pushing this, and especially as white women, because believe it or not, guys, I'm a non-Black person of color, so I'm a white person too. And as a white person who has that privilege in particular, as an entrepreneur, as a social entrepreneur, because usually I tell people like, hey, I do consult, but half of my money goes back into the work that we're doing. Actually more. I feel like this last year has been, I have all of my needs met. I'm a housewife. My wife works at Netflix. I do that. This is passion for me. Like, I get to do what I want, say what I want. Money is still coming, but to be able to just divert what I don't need back into this cause. So I think for people who are coming to this space that are new, you're not going to be a millionaire. I want to tell you that right off the bat. Like, those of you who have dreams of you hit jackpot, you're going to work. You're going to work harder than you've ever worked in your entire life. And I've made a lot of money with this plant. And you're going to work harder than you've ever worked in your entire life. You're also going to feel fulfilled, but some of our responsibility, because I think that's what all of this conversation is that's going on in the world, not just in cannabis, is about respect. So I think as entrepreneurs, we're going to have to respect our market. We're going to have to respect the plant and her origins. We're going to have to respect the fact that we don't know everything, and probably are going to have to educate ourselves and take correction. So to new entrepreneurs, be ready to learn. Like, you don't have it all figured out. Trust me, you don't. Like, none of us really have most of these things figured out. But if you love the plant, like, stick around. Shit's getting interesting. I'd say to new entrepreneurs, stick around. It's finally getting interesting, where thought is being challenged. And this means for those of us who are white women who have that privilege in particular and have that responsibility to hold space for our Black siblings right now. Like, we've been pushing that this, what about us? What about us? What about us? That selfless act in and of itself is going to really define who we are as a people, who we are as women in cannabis in particular. And it's not just picking your favorite Black friend or the one Black person you know in weed. Like, it's really going to be putting some work into having those difficult conversations. So for new entrepreneurs, get ready to get challenged harder than if you thought 2020 was hard and you're just getting into space, or you haven't been here for that long, it's going to get harder. But there's people like Lily, there's all kinds of people. I mean, there's a whole group of women, even myself, even if I give people a hard time, just, I'll be honest, like, I do say things and challenge and push, but there's a bunch of us who are women in this space who just are doing that out of love, like
Right.
Genuine love.
That is what I love so much about so many of us, is I don't challenge and push so hard, but I mean, it's one of the reasons that you and I are so connected, because you do that. And I, with so much love, and
I don't have any kids. So, like, for those of you who have kids, like, I don't have any kids. And although I always joke, and now it's been a little challenging for me, because as a queer person of color whose mother spent most of my adult life raising white people's children, I'm like, man, I really am struggling with, like, but having to remind myself that it's the conversations that I'm having to challenge people isn't, I'm not trying to raise other people. What I'm trying to do is get people to listen and to think differently. And that just comes for me from a place of love. Like, and just like, come on, rainbow poop is judging you. Like, people can't be judging you if you can't just have, like, some basic elements of love. It's not that hard to be a good person. It's really not.
It's actually easier, I think.
It really is. You don't have to, your mind doesn't have to spin out of control of all the duplicitous things you're trying to do to just get over. Like, we don't need that. There's no place in that in this industry. Like, there's no place for it. It doesn't work. Like, the call out is going to come. The clap back is real. Like, if people in the industry, especially new, who are just trying to figure out, like, think, meditate, like, and right now when we're talking about race and inequities and social justice, like, go talk to some of your Black and Indigenous people of color friends, like, go talk to them. Don't just start rattling things off or reposting stuff that you saw from somebody else. Like, we just really need to have those conversations.
Yeah, we need to be not afraid to disagree with each other for a moment to understand where each other's coming from. You know, we need to have healthier, more forward moving conversations. But in order to do that, we have to be fearless ourselves, don't we?
Well, absolutely. I mean, I feel like you sent me a couple of questions, and I'm sure you're going to get to them. So there's one about, and it made me think last night about having to be fearless. Like having, like, you know, what's some of the biggest obstacles I faced as a woman that,
Right.
you know, that I've like overcome. And the first time was like, I put misogyny, right? Like, haha, just kidding. But I think like the biggest thing for me, it's just like standing in my own, trusting myself, trusting what my gut tells me that that's wrong. Like, you know, and knowing and standing firm and being okay if people think I'm weird, or because, you know, and being okay with like, I'm not asking you to accept me. I'm demanding that you respect me. You don't have to accept, you don't even have to like me. I don't even care. I love me and I got a lot of friends. I'll be fine. But I'm demanding that you respect me. And I think that's one of the biggest tools. And we as women in particular, or whether we're trans women, whether we're gender nonconforming people, like we in particular have to work so hard at just trusting ourselves and demanding respect. Like, I'm not asking for you to respect me. I'm demanding that you do. And then at the same time, being okay with my weirdness. Like, I'm okay that I'm weird. I think I'm cool. Like, I'm like, young kids think I'm cool. They think I'm a little crazy too, but they think I'm cool. That's what keeps them coming to my work, and the work that we're trying to build is that, you know, like, we have to empower each other. So my
Right.
biggest thing in terms of just obstacles that I've overcome is really just standing in my truth. And I think it's all of our truth is we're demanding respect. I'm not asking for you to respect me or accept that you've given me a seat on the board because you have to, because the state requires it. Like, no, I'm demanding respect.
So let's dive into some of those hurdles. You just brought up a few, but how? What are, because that's a hard thing, like you said, for women to demand that respect. How do we do that as women in ways so it's not put back in our faces that we're bitches, or do we just go, hey, you know what, we're not bitches. This is respect. Because that's a line that I'm always trying to dance through, is between being heard and between feeling respected and between not feeling like I'm dominating the conversation in the same time.
I think a lot of us are going to have to not care.
Mm,
Like, we're taught as women that we're supposed to care. We're supposed to dance around certain people, certain genders' fragility. I mean, yeah, we just have to learn how not to care and be okay if people think we're bitches. Like, be okay if people want to judge us because we made them feel uncomfortable. But in terms of making it productive, I think we have to actually say those words. Like,
right.
hey guys, I'm not asking your permission to accept me or my thought. I'm demanding that you respect me in the space, and then keep just going. I mean, everybody has their pitch and everything that they say, but I think if more of us just add that to the front so that people know what our values are from the beginning, like,
And I think that what you just said is actually key. It's, you just keep going, because when you're moving forward with your pure intention, then people see where you're at after a while. And so if you don't care for a moment and you keep going, then that's that was a last year's thought. And we give up a lot when we are confronted with a hurdle. in this game. You know, we as women, we think, oh, we need to step away for a moment. We need to, but really we just need to keep going. I've learned that. That's something that legalization has taught me. Um, from working really hard to be a really nice person my whole life, that sometimes I was a lot nicer when I stood in my truth and just kept walking. And most times those people who didn't perceive me as nice, once I finished my walk, changed their mind too.
Of
In that.
course. I mean, and I mean, ultimately, I feel like I'm like a lot of people, a lot of women, we just want to be respected for our humanity, for what we bring to the table. And I think
Yeah.
a lot of that has to start with us unlearning behaviors. Like,
Mm.
I'm not here for white man fragility. I'm not here to make you like me so you'll give me money or you'll support my efforts. Like, and I think if more of us stepped into that, we'd be surprised at how much more energy we're going to start attracting, because more and more women outside with resources who maybe don't have the same experience that some of us do, navigating this space, are going to be able to come together and actually figure out, like, how do we make things work collectively without having to constantly rely on what's become the norm in the industry, which is a bunch of brads.
A bunch of brads.
Bunch of brads
Yeah, you
who
know, that
think they're
does, it's,
cool, who came up during, who picked up a little change during another economic crisis, who kind of are coming into this space with that same kind of heartless intention, that they're being more and more seen. So I think right now we're having a clearing of that energy. So it's like, I think it's important for us as women, as mothers, as sisters, as aunts, as people who give life or who can give life or who are just connected to life like that. And we've got to push that energy out. So, like, demanding respect. And if they don't want to give it to you, they're probably not worth your time. Because
mm,
why do you want to have to get on your knees for any man who's not going to respect you? Not
mm.
worth it.
Yeah, be okay with walking away when it's not happening.
Be okay with walking away. More importantly, like, disempowering that energy, because that's
Mm.
what we have to do. We have to start figuring out ways to disempower it and let it know that it doesn't have a hold. It's not, well, it's how it is. Every time I hear a Betty Sue say that, I get so upset, because I'm all like, no, honey, it's how we let it to be. It's not how it is. It's how we're allowing it to be. And we have the power to not allow that to always have to be the thing that controls us, especially as women.
Yeah, and when you assert that, like you suggested earlier, right off the bat, like, here's where I need this respect, then it's a lot easier when you feel that boundary being pushed to reassert it, and it's usually respected because you already laid out you laid out how you're going to relate to this person and communicate with this person. So we also have some OG legacy free market, however you wish to describe, the ladies from the farms and the hills and the dispensaries, or the rigs that have been involved with this plant for a long time, that are sitting in the middle. It is a really complex time for that community, for my community, because the free market is killing it. The prices are up. Everything is, at least when you're looking at the dollars. Why transition into legalization? Why is this important? Why is this conversation important for women who are trying to determine for themselves how to move forward around this plant?
Well, I think the first thing people have to ask themselves, especially women, is about their freedom. Because if you're not willing to go to prison, especially right now, because they're still going to lock your ass up. Like, The provisions in Prop 64 aren't for us kind of ladies. I'll leave it at that. Like, and I haven't done any of that stuff for a long time. Government, everybody, I don't do that because I'm cognizant. But I think that's the first thing that a lot of us have to ask ourselves. Like, hey guys, they're still locking people up. There's still this system, this incarceral world that we exist in, and is being away from your children worth that? My answer would be no, primarily because I've seen the destruction of families. And at the same time, like the rebel in me is just like, go hard, sisters. But I'm also cognizant that like not everybody can go hard, and that it can impact our babes. And right now in this world in particular, like they need all the love and support that they can get, especially from a mom, their mom, any mom, but really their mom. I'd say be patient with the process, because you're just going to get really annoyed because our government is broken, our institutions are broken, things that people who went to go live off the grid were already cognizant of. That's why they went to go live off the grid and go do their lives their way and provide for their families the best way that they knew that they can, and live just off of the land to not have to be connected to these infrastructures. So know that you're right. I mean, that's one thing I'd also tell my siblings. You're right. This is all broken, but we need you also to actively figure out ways to participate, to help us really dismantle, because your stories are important and valid. And the understanding that you guys have, in particular with the criminal justice system, like those stories from white faces need to be told too. And then when we're telling them that, we also have to be cognizant and respectful of really the magnitude of how fucked up everything has gotten, where we're seeing lynching on TV, where it's becoming the norm. So I think for those of us who have that kind of privilege, like to share those stories. And I mean, there's Trump, dude. I mean, I can't tell you the helicopters and all of the sounds and how my PTSD has been living in Los Angeles. But I think for those of us who do have the kind of background that's a little bit more rebellious, and those who do are just dancing with the idea of, well, I grow really good weed, and I know that I'm growing it organically. I know I could sell it all too. It's already gone. The orders are already here. People are going to come. And it's going to be up to them to be able to get it off the mountain. That's not my job. But it kind of is. It's all of our collective job and our collective responsibility right now to really push back on this unfair infrastructure. And so when we think of it as just playing the game, it's not going to be just playing the game. Like, we're going to have to push back really hard, because the game is really set up against all of us.
Yeah. We need thank you, first of all, for what you just said, because you put something that I feel really strongly but unable to put in words quite like that, which is that we really need all of our oppressed brothers and sisters to come together and not be divisive in our own around our plant, and on all the other levels that we're going against each other with. But right now, with all this challenge to the infrastructure, is the time for our mountain brothers, sisters to work together. I feel like,
well, we have more privilege. Like, I mean, this is a conversation, and I know I pissed some people off, and I might piss them off for saying it again, and I don't really care. Fight me, like I'm right. Like, what happened on the mountain with the 10 people that live there, in terms of having to deal with the police in our carceral system, has nothing in comparison to the 10,000s of bodies that got rolled through on the same 10 acres. So like, it's really being cognizant of our privilege too, that like, dude, you
Right.
had enough money to afford to be able to get out there to do all of that stuff. Because I mean, we do live in a racist society, and those are just facts. But at the same time, like, if you've had this experience, if you understand why it's crucial to be able to defund the broken systems that we have, starting with this one in particular, I mean, ultimately it's a win-win for all of us, because we're respecting each other, we're respecting one another's humanity.
Mm.
And then also being, I mean, for me, I'm just on this having to remind people of, some of us have more privilege than others. And with that privilege does come a lot of responsibility. And the great part is we're all talking about the same bullshit. So, you know, it covers a whole gambit. So wherever you can resonate with the conversation, like, you should. And I mean, I've always stood up. Everybody knows that I've always stood up for farmers. I was one of the only people in the city of Los Angeles the day before Prop 64 who were one of the leaders who spoke at a Women Grow meeting, who was the only one that said, I don't know how I'm going to vote. You can check my voter. I didn't vote. And it killed me as a human being not to vote on what was supposed to be liberating our plant and liberating our people. And I couldn't vote on that because something told me it was bullshit. And it's yet to be determined, but I feel like enough people really kind of feel like, hey, we really did mess up right now, and we really didn't think it all the way through, and it's not working, and it's not going to work because it's not inclusive. It's not taking in our values, and I'm talking about the values that those of us had before all of this. You know, when we used to talk about ourselves as, I'm a patient, and I do this because I'm a patient, versus some people who forgot that they were a patient. Like the day that they opened up the shops, all of a sudden there was a bunch of people who were not patients anymore, who were telling me shit like they've matured. And I was just like, mature? I was like, what does maturity have to do with any of this? I was like, just because you were using this as an excuse to be able to make yourself feel good that you cared about patients, to attract enough people to come to shop at your shop or participate with you, like.
Yeah, you know, I had a interesting conversation, I think it was 2 weeks ago, with a big money man. And he was a part of funding a lot of really big projects around California. And we got on the phone and we were talking about one of my projects. And one of the things he said to me, and I went, oh, this is interesting and good for the people that I think should be involved, is that, you know, I have all these clients with all this money, but they don't, and they have all these big boxes, but they don't have good leadership, and so the boxes are empty because there's no community. And I think that's how this plant wants us to build, is the same way when you build a business, how would you build your community? Because your business is part of your community. You know, and look at it from those values. And, you know, we both know that she is a karmic vehicle. And we're seeing in California that she doesn't like those, you know, she wants her voice to be heard.
She doesn't want to be whored out. She doesn't have to be.
She does not.
I mean, that's the basics. Is she doesn't. Yeah, we're a work in progress, right? Like, it's a nascent industry. That's what people, I have to keep telling myself, like, this is just young. Like, people haven't really gravitated towards what the true ethos of this plant and what she's requiring, because she has a list of demands too. Like you said, I mean, if she is very karmic, I never am out of weed. Like, I always tell people, like, nope. I'm like, sometimes I'll get really low, and then all of a sudden it's just like, oh, you know, like, she always provides.
Yes, she is quite magical. So what, I mean, this is a tough question now, but it was on my list. What do you see for the industry in particular? and I think I already might know some of the answer to this, but what do you see as some of the key things that we need to focus on as activists, as business women, as leaders to pull this industry forward in a positive direction in the next year?
So we're going to need to start stepping outside of our bubble. That's probably bigger than most people realize because they like the feels in church. So we're going to have to do a lot of education in this next year outside of our bubble, intersectional education too, not just who we're trying to sell our products to, but who we want to respect us, not accept us, because we've seen what accepting us gets. Accepting us has gotten us things like Prop 64. They accept us enough to be sin taxed. Another big thing is going to be accountability. We already see it. The ladies from Cannaclusive have already put together their list. There's people like me who've been working on the corporate social responsibility portion of the dialogue. And I have another report that I'm going to be releasing probably around the same time as our Generation Pride Summit, which kind of just is phase 2 of what we wrote, of what we did with the original corporate social responsibility. So it's a little bit more accountability. It's letting the industry know that in the city of Los Angeles, we've got a lot of work to do. And there's lots of ways to grow and learn. But that's going to come with accountability too. And then the other is values. Like, we've gotten so far away. We have 100 values now that are, and some of them are bullshit. So some of us are going to have to call out the bullshit ones and remind people like, no, that's bullshit, and be okay with it. Like, it's okay if people don't agree with you. Like, the values that we set, the intention that we're setting right now in these foundational days of a regulated marketplace are going to have those ripple effects all across this nation. We already know that. We set the trend in California. So I think we're going to have to start questioning our own values and having those difficult conversations about values, and being okay with some of the call out, especially if there's corrective measures, because it can't just be call out. We have to also tell people, like, here's what you can do. I mean, granted, some people, like racist people, we really can't tell them what to do. But racism is not one of my values, and it's not one of this plant's values, especially a plant that's indigenous to regions that are really just people of color. For everybody who hasn't read or is just glancing over the fact that this plant is indigenous to Africa and Asia. I mean, so like those 3 things is like, you know, the education that we're going to need, the accountability, and of course, getting centered on some values that we can be proud of, so that so this government doesn't continue to just like bend us over at every opportunity that they can, to beat us down, to arrest us, to continue to criminalize, and for people who are entrepreneurs to make it so hard so that you can't have a profitable business, to tax you unfairly, to tax you without real representation. Like, those are all things that have to be dealt with sooner than later, because waiting on any government infrastructure to tell us, oh, we have legalization now, let's move forward, and our values are all screwed, guess what's going to happen? We're going to be all screwed.
Right. Well, we're looking at that now, aren't we?
Some people more than others.
Yeah.
I feel like I'm removed enough to not have to, I don't have that same kind of economic interest, but I do have the interest of pushing our municipalities to be better and do better, because it's also part of the requirement of this plant. She brings healing. And if she can't bring healing to the indigenous people who have hundreds and thousands and millennias worth of relationship with this plant. I mean, I'm Mexican American, so I know that my people have at least 600 years worth of a relationship, because while we had slaves on the East Coast, we had slaves on the West Coast as well that were cultivating hemp. So, you know, it's just one of those things that we're gonna push forward through, because ultimately she offers healing in every way.
So how can folks find this information, find you online and your resources?
So if you're gonna look for me, if you look for me on LinkedIn, I don't even put anything on there. I got really weirded out one time, and people keep trying to push me to go. I'm like, I'm never gonna be on that shit. I don't care. I'm a real person. Not that people who are on LinkedIn aren't. I know what purpose it serves. So don't find me there. You can find me at the Social Impact Center, which is the socialimpactcenter.org. I'm pretty sure if you sign up for something, uh, email me there. I mean, my email is simple. It's Felicia at the socialimpactcenter.org. You can find me there. You can find me some of the other work that I'm doing, because I'm also not just doing my nonprofit in the city of Los Angeles. I'm also one of the leaders from National Expungement Week. So if people who are familiar with National Expungement Week, it is led by Tori Wallace, who is an amazing and incredibly underrated woman in this space, which really upsets me, because there's so many of us who are so incredibly underrated, who actually have our finger on the pulse of things. But it's a Black-led, she's the Black director of National Expungement Week. So if you go to offtherecord.us, you'll see that this is going to be our 3rd annual expungement week. We're also extending that to additional year-long wraparound services to be able to provide some of this much needed holistic healing in our communities. So I'm doing that. So in California, I am the California coordinator of National Expungement Week. I need support. I'm going to need resources to make this happen, so that I'm going to need volunteers. I'm going to need lawyers who have their time to devote pro bono, because a lot of these expungements we already know we're working with the public defender's office in the city of Los Angeles and already defining some of what we can and can't do. But like right now, to explain to people, some of the members of marginalized communities and those who've been the most impacted by the war on drugs need basic stuff like food. People who are getting out of jail need some basics. People who are just dealing with the collateral consequences of the war on drugs, which a lot of people don't really discuss, or some of those implications of how bad it is to say that, like, hey, last year we offered just fixing people's taillights. We had a drive-through where you could get your taillight fixed so that the cops wouldn't mess with you. So we're going to be doing all kinds of amazing things. We're working with some incredible national leaders. We've also got some really good schools on board with us. And I'm in Los Angeles. 4 out of the 5 people who are working specifically are formerly incarcerated. So we're also seeing a lot of maximized give back from our communities who know that, like, hey, I'm free. Now it's my job to free somebody else. So yeah, I mean, Felicia at the socialimpactcenter.org is the easiest email to reach me at. But I mean, I stay busy, like, to tell people, like, I'm a housewife, like, and I'm a good housewife. I cook for my wife. Somebody used to clean, now I have to clean, which kind of makes me so cognizant of my privilege and being a little spoiled. But I mean, this is what I do 24/7. Like most days, you'll find me in contact with government agencies, nonprofit organizations, really just trying to expand the conversation's reach, because originally I was doing a lot of education related work and it's still needed. Like this coming weekend, I'm doing Abilities Virtual, which has about 90,000 people who are going to be tuning in from all across this world for people who are differently abled. I, like yourself, I have sitting for so long is always bad, right?
I know, me too.
I have a spinal cord injury, so I've been doing the Abilities Expo across the country, and they're going to have that. And I'm fortunate to be invited by Rico Lamitte to participate in Ebony Magazine's like 75th or 75th annual. It's their 75th anniversary, and they're going to be doing something on Juneteenth this weekend. So I'm always like, how can I mean, I feel like I have a servant's heart. So usually my question always is like, how can I help you? And really now I'm starting to ask a lot more like, how can you help me? Like, what's the return on my investment? Because I know how much my help is worth in terms of opening doors to people in places and spaces that typically we've been banned from or excluded from. I'm like you, just like everybody else. Like I'll often tell people the reason why I've stuck around this long is because I don't feel as liberated as I should feel. And as a queer person who worked on the aftermath of Prop 8 because I felt so privileged as a person who got married during that tiny little window, it's the same privilege that I experience in this space as somebody who has access because I can afford this plant, that other people who don't and who should have access to something that comes that's been a part of their cultures for millennia. So I'm busy, but I'm easy to find.
Well, thank you for all your amazing work that you do for so many and for the plant and for our community. When we get off air, I want to talk to you about an opportunity I might have for one of those organizations.
Awesome.
Are there any last words you would like to convey to our audience before we go?
So on the 27th, we're going to be hosting Generation Pride, which is my intersectional love letter to just a bunch of intersectional communities that include cannabis. So I would, invite everybody to come and attend. We've got some really special people, including the legendary Cleve Jones, who's going to be joining us and imparting some words of wisdom. And I think right now, everybody just be kind to yourself. Like, so my wife has to keep reminding me, like, just be kind to yourself, boo. It's okay if you don't do certain things. Like, it's not okay to not. Here's the list of the 3 things that you have to do, like on a daily basis. Like, you have to get up and stretch, and you have to go and eat, and you have to go wash your ass. But like, other than that, like, be kind to yourself. Well, you don't have, and you have to consume cannabis. I guess there's 4 things that you have to do. So that's the last thing, is like to remind people to make sure to medicate as often as you need to. Don't feel guilty about it. Take a shower every day. Eat some good food, and then of course get as much rest as you can, because like this journey that we're on in and outside of cannabis, the marathon that we're running, the fast-paced times, they're going to need us to have our mind ready, our hearts ready, and really sometimes it's going to feel like we can't do it, but we're just going to have to keep pushing through it.
Oh, yes, we are. We need to support each other through it so we can stay healthy and strong. Well, thank you. I sure appreciate so much of what you shared with us today. And I love how it just was the right time for the conversation, and we didn't even plan that.
Yeah, I'm like, this is my conversation. I've been having it for the last 4 years. So yes.
Yeah.
And it wasn't even that uncomfortable, right? I mean, I even make it like unicorn poo is judging.
Yes. I need some unicorn poo.
We all need unicorn poo.
We all need unicorn poo.
Unicorn poo.
All right. Well, thank you. And thank you for tuning in, everybody. You can find Felicia at thesocialimpactcenter.org. and on Facebook. You can find me on Facebook at Humboldt Grace, a community gathering place, and Women Empowered in Cannabis. Have a beautiful Sunday, and just be kind. Put kindness first, then state what you need to have to say, because we all need to speak our truth, but we don't need to react. We just need to be heard. So thank you. Have a beautiful day.